Hello, and welcome to the Focusing Way podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm your host, David Battistella. We can all close our eyes and imagine a moment when we have experienced or witnessed a highly stressful crisis situation. Maybe someone started screaming. Perhaps there was an accident, or a loved one took ill in the middle of a big family event. In our work life, maybe we had a challenging client. Maybe we didn't make our number this month, or our boss is breathing down our neck. Maybe as a boss, you've been feeling the pressure of managing different people. All of these situations can take us out of ourselves, out of our normal way of being, and make for unpleasantness in our lives. It can detract from us performing and living at our own version of our best. There are these moments that happen in our lives that can create a kind of stress panic or anxiety, which leave us and the people around us shocked or confused and not knowing what to do or how to feel. Obviously, focusing can help with this. Our guest today is Vicky Peterson. For 26 years, Vicky has worked on the front lines in a 24/7 psychiatric crisis center in Boulder, Colorado. Whether it's over the phone or in person, she goes into work on a daily basis without a clue of what a voice might tell her over the phone or who might walk through the door in a crisis situation. Over time, Vicky learned nonviolent communication and focusing as tools that help her be present to the situations she faces on a daily basis in both her work life and also by using focusing as a way to be present in her home life as well. I invite you to listen in on our focusing-oriented conversation and hear some stories about how living in a focusing way has helped Vicky and her clients and her coworkers cope with the high stress of a crisis center. First, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm really happy to be doing this because I'm really enthusiastic about focusing, and I like that you're getting it out into the world.
Well, thank you. So, Vicky, maybe we could just begin by you telling me a little bit about how you came to focusing.
You know, I was trying to think about that before our conversation. I think I started in 2008. I know that I met you in 2010 at the Treasure Maps retreat. But I think I started in about 2008. I was doing a lot of nonviolent communication study, and it just seemed like focusing was in the air. Several people started mentioning focusing and saying, oh, I think you'd really like it. And then I got online and started checking it out. And I thought, this is a really good fit for me. And then pretty soon after hearing about it, I started taking classes with Anne.
And when you say Anne, just for everyone else listening, that's Anne Weiser Cornell at Focusing Resources. And the treasure maps that Vicky mentioned is an advanced version of focusing that Anne and Barbara McGavin teach as part of their program. And that's the program I came through as well. Vicky, I was just hoping you could tell me a little bit about your day-to-day in the crisis center. What's a typical day look like for you?
Well, there isn't really a typical day because we have no appointments. We're an office that never closes, so we're open 24/7. People can stop in anytime. People can call in anytime. So some of our work is by phone, some is face to face. And people come in with whatever they consider to be a crisis. And it could be something as minor as it's 2 in the morning, I'm calling in because I can't sleep, or I opened my refrigerator this morning and the yogurt was spoiled. It can be that kind of thing, to people saying, I'm at the end of my rope, I am just going to kill myself. And it can be people who are psychotic and are not in our usual shared reality, hearing voices, seeing things. So we talk to people by phone and in person, and we help them decide what the next step is that they need. And we also do psychiatric evaluations for hospitalizations. We go to the jail, we go to the emergency room, we are mobile, we go to people's homes. So whatever anybody thinks is a psychiatric emergency, we get involved in.
Wow, that sounds like pretty intense work, and I'm just wondering, how did focusing help you maintain a kind of evenness to be able to handle that kind of situation? Because most people in their day-to-day don't go moment to moment, not knowing who's going to phone or who's going to walk through the door.
So, yeah, that's a really good question, David. Sometimes I use it to help myself have more understanding and patience. For instance, this week, one of my coworkers said, these people who say, I'm worried I can't keep myself safe, that just sounds manipulative. I feel really annoyed at that, my coworker said. And so I said, well, from a focusing perspective, there could be a part of the person who wants to kill themselves and a part of the person who doesn't want to die. And there could be a third part that's worried about which one of those is going to get in the driver's seat. So that helps me then be interested and curious and stay patient, rather than saying, well, that doesn't make any sense. That just sounds like they're trying to manipulate me.
You've touched on something so important about listening, but also in listening in a focusing way and being other focused. So when you're in a situation like that, the situation you just described is a way of being other focused. It's a way of understanding something from someone else's perspective and maybe breaking out the pieces so that even your coworker can cope with whatever they're dealing with. In this case, something in her was frustrated that it was perhaps being manipulated.
Yes, that's right. So it gets pretty complicated. There's parts in me, there's parts in my coworkers, there's parts in the clients, and all of those parts are, they're trying to get their needs met. They're trying to do the best job they can, but they don't always understand each other or what the other parts are trying to do. So yeah, it's a way to kind of have a path through all of that.
Mm-hmm. Sort of creating a pathway or a space, even just to be able to really take a look at what's happening in any given situation.
Right.
And perhaps even slowing those situations down. Do you find that, one of the nice things we like to say in focusing is slowing down is the fastest way there.
Mm-hmm.
Or have you ever used that sort of idea of slowing things down in situations in your work that could be really kind of supercharged?
Yes, I use that a lot. And along with slowing down, bringing that attitude of self in presence, of making a big, friendly, welcoming space for whatever is there. So I was talking to a client who needed to go into the psychiatric hospital, but the man was saying, part of me knows I need to go into the hospital, and part of me really doesn't want to go. He was already using focusing language. People find it quite natural. And so then I took the time to say, well, let's hear what those parts are saying. He gave me the perfect opening for that. And then he was able to say, I can't go on the way I am. I know I have to make a change. I know I need to talk about medications with a psychiatrist, so I should go in the hospital. And then I said, let's hear from the part that doesn't want to go. And that part said it was scared. It didn't know what it was going to be like. It didn't know what it said about him as a person. He's the kind of person who has to go to a psychiatric hospital. So just by taking a few minutes and slowing that process down, rather than just saying, well, you have to go to the hospital, you really don't have a choice now, which I might have done before I learned focusing. The psychiatrist says you have to go to the hospital, so you're going. Just by slowing it down, being friendly to both those parts, saying, let's hear from both of them, then he himself came to the conclusion, I need to do this right now. It's the right thing.
How did you perceive how he felt about being heard in that way?
I've never had a client react badly to it. People like to be heard. They do find it very natural that there's different parts of themselves, and they're grateful, really. They're appreciative for taking the time to hear all of that. And there's lots of kind of aha moments that come from just listening.
Mm-hmm. And that use of presence language in those situations, you were just describing how you could compare what you may have done before compared to what happens now. Can you talk about whether or not you're finding that there's a lot less explosive kind of situations because you can bring presence and presence language to these situations?
I would say that's very true. And just like the situation I was describing, instead of getting into a power struggle with the client and saying, you really have to go into the hospital now, which then, of course, the part that doesn't want to go immediately feels alarmed and pushes back and says, no, actually, I don't want to go. I'm not going to go. And then you get into a situation of having to call the police and taking them forcibly, which is awful for everybody. And all the clients really I've used this with have reacted really well to it and really positively. And they do calm down. So there's no getting into a power struggle when you're listening with empathy. And in that situation, I would be giving empathy also to both of those parts of my client. The one that wanted to go, I would be feeding that back to him. So you're saying that your life right now is not what you want it to be. You'd really like to see some changes. You really don't want to go on like this. And then I would be giving empathy to the part that doesn't want to go. Well, of course you don't want to go into a psychiatric hospital. It's a whole new, strange experience. You don't know what to expect. Yeah, and of course that's not the way you want to identify yourself. You want to be a competent person. You want to be a person who can manage your life on your own.
Yeah.
So parts like to have empathy.
What do you think this really says about the focusing process? Because I know for me, it was very important to put focusing to the test in almost every aspect of my life. Like it really, I wanted to see if it could be broken in a sense. Like, is there a situation where it doesn't apply or it can't help. I haven't found that situation. But could you talk a little bit about how it's been helpful in your life outside of work? And then maybe we'll come back and talk about also your life in your workplace.
Well, focusing, of course, has made me much more aware of my own inner parts. I have 2 focusing partners that I meet with, one every week and one every other week. And that gives me a chance to do my own personal focusing and really listen to the inner parts. But yeah, I just use it all the time. There was a person who came into the office yesterday who was very angry, swearing and saying he wasn't getting any help. And he actually left before I could get to see him. He just stormed out. And then I realized that there was a part of me that was really relieved. I didn't want to see a person who was angry and aggressive and threatening. And I could give that part of myself some empathy.
Mm-hmm. Whereas sometimes without those tools, we could just end up feeling guilty or something for that without being able to just acknowledge a part of ourselves that says, yeah, I really didn't want to have that experience.
Yes, and you hit it right on the head. There was also a part of me that felt guilty and said, you should have seen that person. It's part of your job. You didn't do it right. So that part was coming through loud and clear also. You didn't do a good job.
Mm. But then bringing focusing into those situations, you can separate them out and come into relationship with each one while you yourself are in presence, noticing each one of these things. And it just ends up being a sort of a calmer experience.
Much. Yeah, it's a much calmer experience. And instead of letting those 2 parts, you didn't do a good job, and I'm really glad I didn't have to see that person because I'm scared of him. Instead of those 2 kind of going at each other, I could make the space for listening to both of them and realizing that each of them has a very good point from their own point of view.
And maybe even you could get on with the rest of your day and the next thing that might be coming at you without having to sort of carry that through your day.
Yes, it's very important when I come home from my work to be aware of what parts have gotten stirred up. And even the days that I don't work, it's just really important for me to notice there's something going on there in my stomach. What is that about? Mm-hmm. And to really listen.
You've been listening to our focusing-oriented conversation with Vicky Peterson, who has shared stories and focusing strategies about her work in a Boulder, Colorado psychiatric crisis center. Stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation in our next episode. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to the Focusing Way podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm your host, David Battistella.